Westchester University is a beautiful place, not only aesthetically, but because of the people who make up its community. Freedom of speech and thought is welcomed on our campus, and students embrace this way of thinking. But when the radical Christian group known as Matthew 24 started showing up to our campus, the lines between what is considered free speech and hate speech got blurred.
People is a sin?
No, Jesus bashed on people.
Judging people is a sin.
Jesus called a woman a dog. Mark 7:27.
You're sinning by
I don't call the whores on campus dogs.
Why you lying for? Why you lying for? I'm talking to you. It's all good. Yeah, well, guess what? That's my neighbor. I take care of him when we go out. You stay away from the boy. You stay away from the boy.
I know you're a pedophile. You're gonna burn right. God might let me be the one that throws you in hell too. He's good at it.
This is Pastor Hayden Rossville. He and his crew go by the name of Matthew 24, and as you can probably tell, they aren't your average Christian group. They've been visiting college campuses and other public domains for years now, and for most observers, it seems like they only have one goal in mind: stir up as much trouble as they can. Most radical groups like Matthew 24 aim to convert people, and that's usually their reasoning for showing up to public places and spewing their rhetoric.
The fox, he called his own disciple Peter Satan. Where's my Catholic there? He said, "Get behind me, Satan."
That's
But Matthew 24 is different. No one believes their goal is to convert people or have a reasonable discussion about anything. Instead, most believe they aim to antagonize people into reacting to their hateful rhetoric. In an article published by Philly Mag in April of 2018, Victor Ferrillo outlines what Pastor Hayden and his group's true intentions are when they do their street preaches. First off, it's important to note that Pastor Hayden hasn't always been a radical street preacher. According to Ferrillo's article, Hayden Rossville made a name for himself while running investment schemes during the late 2000s and into the early 2010s. He was known as Big A to many of the people whose money he took. After running numerous investment schemes, the Federal Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, fined Rossville millions of dollars. And just last year, the Internal Revenue Service filed an $800,000 plus federal income tax lien against Pastor Hayden and his wife in Bucks County. Once a schemer, always a schemer.
Hey, this is Pastor Hayden here. We're protesting here in Lansdale about the drag queen. There's a whole bunch of other Christian brothers and sisters. It says hate evil, love good. See all the signs? We've decided to take the battle to the gate, come up to the front line, and here's all the homos.
Come in peace. I just hope we all can have a peaceful opposition.
Yes, we are coming in the peace of Jesus when Jesus comes back.
Here's an example of one of the videos you may find on Matthew 24's channel. These videos only capture Pastor Hayden or someone else in his group getting attacked. Rarely do we get to see the argument that led up to the confrontation.
Homos have a higher suicide rate than normal people. That's actually a statistical fact, sir. Why do you have a purple cape on?
Like you.
What? I don't kill anybody.
No, this fucking hatred.
This guy here admitted to being a homo. Ponytail boy right here, the whitey.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say that to you, sir. Racists go to hell, sir. Racists go to hell.
You're gonna have to leave.
Don't touch me.
hey.
Clearly, this video makes Pastor Hayden look like the victim here. The Philly Mag article on Pastor Hayden also details a handful of the lawsuits that he's been involved in over the past few years. Per Ferrillo's article, in 2016 he pleaded guilty to violating the noise disturbance ordinance in Westchester. In May 2017, Pastor Hayden was charged with ethnic intimidation, harassment, and other offenses in Montgomery County. According to a Pennsylvania State Police report, Pastor Hayden was allegedly outside of a Buddhist temple in Salford Township in his Ford Expedition, using his megaphone to verbally attack worshippers and a Buddhist nun over their religion and perceived national origin.
College. When you're married, you're no longer a virgin. Duh. Okay, it's time for sex ed.
Here at Westchester University, we've dealt with Matthew 24 numerous times, and his hate is never exclusive to one group either. One day, his target could be the LGBTQ community, and the next it could be Muslims or another religious group. You never really know what you're going to get when Pastor Hayden shows up to your campus. Personally, I never had any first-hand experience with a group like Matthew 24 until I came here and saw them right here in our own quad. And like most of you, my initial thought was, why are these guys able to do this on our campus and get away with it? Due to my lack of experience with a group like Matthew 24, I wanted to gather as many perspectives on the group as I could. I spoke with a handful of people around our campus, all with differing identities and perspectives on Pastor Hayden and his band of hateful Christians. My goal was to figure out the most productive way our campus can prevent Pastor Hayden from ever showing up to our university again. The first faculty member I spoke with was Dr. Lisa Hebner. Dr. Hebner is a feminist sociologist of gender and a professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies here at Westchester University. She has over 20 years of experience in the areas of intersectionality theory and sociology of gender. She's one of the many professors who are called upon whenever Matthew 24 shows up to the quad, and she was kind enough to share some of her experiences with me.
So I have observed groups like Matthew 24 come to campus since I've been here, and I learned over time what that means for a group to come to a publicly funded university. Of course, you can imagine it. At first, I was just like, what the heck, right? Like, how are they here? My students, regardless of political belief or thought, always feel uncomfortable with groups like this. I have students who are Christian who say to me, you know, this makes Christians look bad, right? Like a wide range of students generally feeling like we just don't want these folks here. Typically, students would counter protest, and then I would help, right? As a faculty member who's been not just a theorist and a writer, but also an activist in the streets. So I'm like super comfortable in those scenes. Matthew 24 comes right after the presidential election. I mean, like really like the next semester. And I did my thing, right? And I'm not the only one. Like there are several, you've talked to some of us who just kind of make a habit of going out and not trying to control the students, but just really guide the students and not necessarily stop the agitators, right? But just sort of like make sure that everything's safe and you know, nobody's getting too escalated. So when I go out there this time, the nature of the agitation was less about, you know, how do you make sure you get to heaven, which has always been steeped in, you know, homophobic language and sexist language, but more really misogynist harassment. I mean, like really like ugly, sexist, we hate women and we're going to say bad things about women types of verbal harassment. And I was shocked at how much that had escalated. So I probably should have also mentioned I'm a sociologist and I'm real comfortable with making observations over time and making those claims. So it did change. It was different. It was more. So I think maybe the first time I was out there were a couple of us out there and we were really generally, as you know, the suggestion is just to walk away and ignore it, you know, and that's been a result of strategy with student affairs, with the president's office. Like we all kind of just like agreed on that message. So we were trying to do that. And it was either the first or the second time where I was doing that. And you know, it's interesting with Matthew 24, what's different about them other than the nature of the harassment being so extreme and hateful. It was fast, Brian. It was fast. Like how quickly what almost is a everyday part of my work became personal. And so what happened was I was out there with other faculty and students trying to encourage students to go and, you know, saying things like, don't listen to them, you know, just don't pay. They just want your attention. And at that point, the agitator must have heard my name.
For you, hold on with the camera. I remember you from the first time I was here and you caused a little riot. Pastor Hayden has a great memory. You and Lisa, where's she at? Been praying for you guys.
You know, I don't think I'm that famous, right? Must have heard my first name and maybe my last name by a couple of other students because I had students, of course, saying, you know, using my name, talking to me, what can we do, you know, that kind of thing, and then directly use my first and last name and started to project that out and make very slanderous claims about my life. And so there were a couple things that were said that were personal and could have been true. And then there was one thing, then there was a clear threat. And the threat was to come to my house, and if I'm not going to let him talk here, he'll come to my house and talk there. And so when that happened, that pretty much stopped me in my tracks.
As I continued my conversation with Dr. Hebner, I began to realize that this group wasn't doing this to try and convert students to their cause or to have any sort of discussion on their ideology.
And I think what happens is and this is where, like, I want my students to have a voice, right? Like, in my classroom, right? I'm like, God, challenge me, right? It's fine. But so I think what happens is, we have our students, especially our newer students who are maybe not accustomed to these kinds of scenarios, feeling like, I want to say what I know is true. I want to state my truth. And so I acknowledge that with my students who are social justice minded. And I say, like, look, this is not the space where you're going to be able to make a difference. This is not an activist space. And so I think, and I know that kind of conversation happens more in other classes that focus specifically on activism, but I kind of try to take it there too, that, yeah, we want you to have a voice, but nobody's hearing anybody here.
Yeah, I understand.
It's important to educate our entire campus community about the role of this group, like who this group is, what they're trying to do. We might not be able to pursue legal action, but maybe we can make cultural change. And this is the way you do it, right? This is the way you do it. If enough people understand that this group is just a waste of time, maybe we will stop paying attention and maybe they'll stop coming, right? So for me, sometimes choosing when to be silent is an amazing act of social justice. If we can just not pay attention, that might actually be the very change that we need to make. So
after speaking with Dr. Hebner, she suggested that I also speak with Dr. Simon Ruchti, the department chair of the Women's and Gender Studies here at Westchester University. Like Hebner, Ruchti is also one of the professors who's called upon whenever Matthew 24 is in town. Ruchti's had similar encounters with the group as well, and our discussion about Matthew 24 further helped me to uncover why Pastor Hayden is even doing this in the first place.
Matthew 24 showed up, and I gotta say, it was a different ballgame with them. This guy, he is not very skilled at interpreting the Bible. I swear I can't tell if he's read it at all, because he clearly doesn't understand it, but he is skilled at going up to that line of violating, crossing from free speech into hate speech, and he just toes that line. And he's amazing at antagonizing people. So the first time they were on campus, I'd gotten a call and I was asked to come over and help out with crowd control. And I heard him scream to a trans woman as she was walking by. Either him or one of his lackeys was yelling, "If I were you, I'd kill myself. If I were a tranny, I'd kill myself." Like, just this nastiness. And I remember his public safety, which just kept walking over to the chief at the time and saying, "Can we arrest him now? Can we arrest him now?" And you could tell, you could just see public safety was just so it was so intense and hateful that even these officers who had all this experience with it, you could tell it was just crushing them. I remember one of the officers looked some of them just looked angry and others were just sad. And I thought, this guy, he's different.
Now, any rational or logical human being would consider that to be hate speech, but unfortunately, our legal system doesn't recognize telling someone that they'd be better off dead as crossing the line from free speech to hate speech.
The way that the public school systems, I'm going to have to give you an illustrative example of why you don't even need the Bible to teach you that homosexuality is wrong. You don't even need the Bible.
Well, what about our university, you might ask? Just because the legal system can't prevent Matthew 24 from spreading hate on our campus doesn't mean Westchester University can't, right? Well, on the surface, while that may seem like a feasible solution to the Matthew 24 dilemma, Dr. Ruchti explains why banning Pastor Hayden from our campus could have profound ramifications for the rest of our marginalized groups at Westchester.
And there are times where I want to just shut the whole thing down and say, nope, tell the university to just lock it down. But they can't legally. I mean, they legally really can't. but also the ramifications for the rest of the campus if they did would be profound. You know, it's like, so you imagine something happens on campus and say the Black Lives Matter group on campus wants to have a rally, a walkout, and something happen, and they've got 5 hours to organize it, 24 hours to organize it, and they can be shut down because they're saying things that, you know, maybe make white students uncomfortable. Because white students hate to talk about racism. They just hate it. And so now they can say that these students that are protesting racism are making them uncomfortable because they feel attacked for being white. And so now the university has no choice but to shut down this perfectly legitimate rally if they don't give enough notice, right? But sometimes when you want to organize, especially as students wanting to organize something, you don't always get a lot of time to give notice. So all the ways in which the university could shut it down make it so that people could shut other stuff down. So like me, if we said that making somebody uncomfortable, making somebody feel unsafe at the university is justification for stopping something like Matthew 24, I have students who could use that against me just by my mere presence as a trans person. They could say, you make me uncomfortable in the classroom, I feel unsafe around you, what you're doing is wrong, and I don't have to listen to it, so you can't teach this class. And people say, oh, that would never happen, but it happens all the time. However, Matthew 24, as I said, is very different. There has to be a way for the law to catch up, the legal system to catch up and say, when you are telling vulnerable people that they would be better off dead, that is a violation of free speech, that is not protected by free speech laws, because they go so far. You know, it's too much. Well, unfortunately, the university has already recognized that what they're doing is inciting violence and it's hate speech, but the legal system doesn't recognize that. And so if the university were to try and shut them down and ban them, I think that would be the right thing to do. But I also know that that would open the university up for a lawsuit, and then all the money from that lawsuit would go to giving this group a mega church, and they wouldn't win the lawsuit. So some of the things that they've tried doing is, you know, kind of relocating them to specific areas of the campus to try and move them out of that central path, and it didn't work. You know, it didn't really help. But then they run the risk of getting sued for limiting their mobility on public property. So it creates all sorts of problems in how to go about doing it. I think what the university would have to do is be willing to say the safety of our most marginalized students is worth throwing all of the money we can behind a lawsuit that says these folks have crossed the line. They would need to videotape everything that happens on that quad and look for those moments in which these folks are inciting a riot. The problem is that it's usually the students who are inciting the riot, right? And because they go so far. I mean, frankly, if our students were smart about it, and the students who weren't there because they wanted to watch, you know, reality TV show or Jerry Springer, if they would just go the hell away, and the students who actually really wanted to make things better were the ones that were out there, it would make it much easier for the university to say, hey, this isn't our students, this is these folks. I think a lot of times students are like, they think that they're going to convince anybody to hear things differently. They want to engage in a debate. But what these folks are saying is not designed for a debate. It's designed to ridicule and mock. It's the most irrational stuff you've ever heard. You can watch this guy. He will shift his argument back and forth just to be funny. And I mean, from my understanding, and I was involved a while ago in a lot of these conversations, my understanding is our president really did, you know, push the legal team, the university's legal team, to help them come up with a way to keep them from campus, to say they can't be there or to limit what they're allowed to say. and it failed. And I mean, honestly, just the thought of the university shelling out $100,000, $200,000 to this guy makes me say it's not worth it to go that route.
After speaking with both Dr. Hemer and Dr. Ruckty, I began to doubt that there was any way to legally ban Matthew 24 from our campus. Pastor Hayden is a master at riding the line between hate speech and free speech, and he uses it to his advantage. In order to gain a better understanding of the intricacies that contribute to free speech and hate speech, I reached out to Dr. Chris Stangl, a professor in political thought and public law here at Westchester. His research is heavily interested in First Amendment law, so if there's anyone on our campus who would know how to differentiate free speech from hate speech, it's Dr. Stangl.
Sure. The short answer is because, the Supreme Court has basically said as much in making sense of the First Amendment, but the medium-length answer is that Westchester is a public school. Some of the areas on campus count as what's called a limited public forum, in that they're open to the public at some points, of the day and some days of the week, some hours of the day, etc. And as such, any group could show up, right? The fact that very few other groups bother is kind of indicative of, the strategy behind Matthew 24, right? They're seeking to provoke, and I think everybody knows that. Most people wouldn't bother because, I think many groups are actually trying to, change policy and not just incite, but, and that's not the word I should use because they're not directly inciting people, but, looking to provoke just for the sake of a reaction, right? But there's other folks that come on campus. People will come distribute Bibles. People will come, just to job fairs. And job fairs a little bit different because it's in, usually in a building. But the public's invited to Westchester a lot of the time, and Matthew 24 is part of the public. So, two things, I guess. If you're looking to discourage them and other groups from coming to campus, I think one thing you'd want to do is not say that you're trying to discourage them, because that's going to make them want to come, right? They're going to feed off the opposition and the resentment that they think they'll feel. So, this goes back to just kind of ignoring them when they are here. And I think if they were to show up, 2 or 3 times and people just walk by as if nothing was going on, their objective is then thwarted, right? If everybody just walks by and pretends they're not there, they have no expectation that they can provoke people. And again, I 8 to 10 years ago, we had another episode of this, and it seemed like there was a lull for a couple of years, so maybe different tactics are appropriate at different times, but it's not as if Westchester's overrun by groups, every Thursday, right? So this group is an outlier in a lot of ways, and I have no idea what's going on in their planning meetings or in their worldview, but it seems like they get less attention, or have gotten less attention the last couple of times. It was a bigger, deal 2 or 3 years ago, I think. And so another part of it is just kind of educating students or letting them know. It doesn't have to be a formal thing, but word of mouth from other students, or maybe just a 5 minutes at orientation where you say, hey, this is a public school. Folks show up and say all sorts of things, and you might not like it, but it's just part of it, so roll with it, right? Kind of diminishing the importance of it, is a decent way to go.
At this point, it seemed to me that the only realistic way to discourage Matthew 24 from coming to our campus was to educate our community on their purpose and why engaging with them only adds fuel to their fire.
There's a few different ways to respond to it, but I think the first thing is you have to realize that they have a legal right to be here, and they know that. And secondly, you kind of have to be reasonably intelligent about how you proceed. These folks have done their homework, right? So they are looking to take advantage of other people's lack of knowledge about the specifics. It's easy to get caught up in just how ignorant or uninformed, or retrograde their views are, and think that just because, they seem obviously wrong about what they're saying, they must just be wrong about everything, and they're preying on that, right? It's a tactic. It's some specific knowledge, some restraint, right? And the restraint could be just not bothering to go over there and see what's going on for yourself, just knowing that it's not worth seeing. Mm-hmm. It could be the restraint that, you're checking it out, but you're going to, walk away if you feel provoked. Sometimes a sense of humor is a decent way to respond. Years past, I think it was either a different group or they had a different name. Groups would raise money off their presidents, right? They would solicit funds, and they might counter with chants that were lighthearted. So humor has its place. And again, the Matthew 24 didn't invent this playbook, especially with this group. I think it's more, let's go to some public schools and where we get the biggest response, we'll go back to, and hopefully we find a way to fund ourselves long enough to keep this really weird circle going. Yeah.
I preach just like Jesus Christ.
The best way to combat Matthew 24 is really quite simple. Just ignore them. Don't give them your time of day. Based on what we've seen, it seems like their sole purpose is to get a reaction out of you, so don't be fooled into thinking it's anything else. They aren't trying to change your ideology or save your soul like Pastor Hayden may claim. Luckily, our campus has done a great job in educating students on Matthew 24 in recent years. The student government, or the SGA, has played a huge part in this. This is Rodney Kaplan, the president of the SGA at Westchester. He and his fellow SGA members created the WCU Stands Initiative just over 2 years ago as a countermeasure to Matthew 24 and other hate groups that may visit our campus.
So it was probably, 2 years ago, so 2017, when Matthew 24 started showing up more regularly on campus. It was an initiative between both the student government and also the Division of Student Affairs. I was serving as treasurer at the time of student government, and we wanted to have some kind of reaction to them coming to campus. I know at first it wasn't as regular, so they would come like once a month, but then throughout, October, as it was nice that month, they kept coming more regularly. So we wanted to have an initiative set up to be a counter protest to the hate they were spewing, because you get the campus emails, and people don't understand why, as a public institution, with First Amendment and protecting those kind of rights as a public institution, why anyone can come to campus, and if we do anything to infringe upon those rights, then you have to limit that for everyone. And we want, obviously, as a public institution, want to be a place of exchange of open ideas and things of that nature. So we started the WCU Stands Initiative as a counter protest to Matthew 24. So we would set up whenever they set up. We would hand out, I think one day it was super hot, so we got ice pops and stuff. We would have posters that said WCU stands for and WCU doesn't stand for, and then we would have students go try to get students that were forming crowds around Matthew 24 to come over, be a part of the more positive interaction, right? What values that we do stand for as a campus.
Rodney's chief concern is educating students on Matthew 24's purpose and turning their negativity into something that's positive and will benefit our campus.
I've talked to students from different campuses across the state about how they deal with hate groups or people coming to their institutions, and I know some of them have walk on by campaigns where you try to get it just to be a part of the culture that yes, again, understanding that we're a public institution, that these are people's First Amendment rights to a free speech, but also it's you can also have the right to counter protest or to just walk on by, and that helps and if we keep crowding around them and they keep coming back and seeing that they're going to get a reaction, then that's what keeps them coming back. So I think having the logic to talk to students and get them to understand that, once they realize, especially first year students every year, what's going on, I think they are appreciative and really like the counter protest. I think this year, I guess it was in October when they were here, we actually were doing a jack-o'-lantern contest on the quad, separately planned from what they were doing, which really worked out well, because then we just could get students to come over and carve a jack-o'-lantern instead of interacting with them. And we were fundraising for the resource pantry on campus. So it was really a nice way to turn something that was kind of negative, and obviously no one enjoys Matthew 24 being here, but turn that negativity into something positive that's going to come back and benefit the campus. Important. And I guess for me, even personally, I see a college campus as a place for an open exchange of ideas, and you have people coming from all different walks of life, and you don't want anyone to have like those isolated, ideologies, because that's how, hate festers. So I think as you can continue to like meet people in the open and debate them and, have a free exchange of ideas, I think that's how you counteract hate and intolerance. But I think like creating an environment where that's like not tolerated, or where people can't argue against those ideas, isn't really productive in trying to get rid of it.
I got you. Although Rodney is graduating this semester and will no longer be the president of the SGA, he hopes that WCU stands, with the help of other departments on campus, will continue to educate students on Matthew 24 and other hate
departments on campus. So I'm graduating in May, so it won't be super long, but our next president and our next administration is going to be working on, working with, different departments like Res Life, wellness ambassadors, and different areas of campus, so that when we do have, hate groups, and it's only been Matthew 24 in my time here, which it's good to see that it's not like something that's spitballing out of control, or you have like different hate groups coming every week. But that's kind of where we're taking this initiative into the future, trying to work with more professional staff on campus, so that when they do come, the burden's not just on like one group of students, but it's more broadly shared across campus. And getting everyone again involved, and having like Res Life be able to bring out some like lawn games and things, and again turning their events into like moving that negativity into a positive atmosphere, and kind of not ignoring them, but being like, we're going to continue to live our lives and walk on by. So I think that's the message that we would like to get out to students, and hopefully they'll stop coming to campus.
When we look at a group like Matthew 24, let's just be honest with ourselves. There's no point in engaging with them. So the next time you see them at your college campus, or anywhere for that matter, just walk right past them. Your attention is what they're seeking, so don't give it to them. And maybe, just maybe, they'll stop coming to your college campus.